Okay. Um, well, under Wisconsin open records law, there's what's called a balancing test. And the test basically requires the record custodian to weigh, for example, the right of a victim to maintain privacy.
Certainly.
You can redact a name and identifying information.
Absolutely.
With the public's need to know here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there could be any more of an acute need to know if an elected official is abusing his or her power by sexually harassing staffers. That would seem to me to be sort of the highest order of need to know. The other rationale that's been trotted out by assembly leaders, so this is Robin Vos, that's basically calling the shots here.
Republican Speaker
Right.
Robin Vos.
This particular story happens to be about a former Democratic representative that engaged in the alleged harassment here. But the decision about releasing the records is coming from assembly leadership. That's Robin Vos. The secondary rationale is that they don't want to have a chilling effect on people that would report. Perhaps we should be worried about having a chilling effect on the people that behave this way.
Right.
Right? Like, isn't that
That's
the
the
chilling
point?
effect? Right?
Right.
And again, the context here, I don't care who's doing the harassing.
Yeah.
Right? My point is, why do you think that the public doesn't have a right to know that elected officials are abusing their power? You can protect victims by redacting their names and identifying information. And there may be circumstances where even that isn't required. For example, when I have handled open records requests that deal with sensitive information, we will frequently talk to the reporter. I mean, not the news reporter, but the person who has reported the harassment. Are you comfortable? Do you agree to have your name released?
Yeah.
Right. So there are ways to deal with these things, but the idea that records requests should be denied in whole or in substantial part based on this concept that you'll have a chilling effect on people reporting, or that you need to protect the victim, and that's where the discussion stops, is so misconstruing both the whole intent of our open records laws here in Wisconsin, and also ignores the fact that you can protect victims in other ways. You can engage with the victim, or the person that's reporting the harassment, to find out, hey, what do you feel about the release of your name? Because if that victim feels strongly enough, and I'm sure many of them do, they'd say, go ahead and put that out there.
Yeah.
I would rather have the person who's engaging in the behaviors and others that are similarly situated being chilled from, conducting themselves in this way. But this is a long-standing pattern and practice that comes from the Republican-controlled legislature in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has, if you go into Chapter 19 and you read our open records law, and I'm speaking of Chapter 19 of the Wisconsin statutes, you can Google it and read it yourself. It begins with a statement of principle at the beginning of the open records law. And it is one of the broadest statements of principle that exist under any state statutes nationwide. And it has the strongest presumption in favor of release of records. And so watching the assembly, what they first did when Walker was in power was they actually limited the applicability of the state's open records laws as it applies to state government, and
Yes.
specifically the state legislature.
Right. Exempt
Which is
themselves
like
from the open
everybody
records
else
request.
has to tell the truth and turn over the documents except for us. We know that Republicans have routinely flouted this. And it's not just the Gableman hysteria and conspiracy, right? And I think we need to call it a conspiracy, a fraud on the taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin that will end up probably clocking in at well over the $1 million mark, maybe even reaching $2 before
Well,
all
we're
is
at
said and
$2.5
done.
million reporting right now. Yes.
I mean, this is crazy, and they're going to continue to appeal this. Like, no, he was. Save that for a second. I just want to finish the history here, right? So they changed the law. Gableman has flouted open records law, which he should be well familiar with as a former state Supreme Court justice. But the assembly also, in the gerrymandering lawsuits, and when press agencies inquired of the assembly to turn over certain correspondence related to their very map drawing, they refused to turn over huge swaths of that as well. So let's just pause, pull back, and look at these three categories of Republicans refusing to be transparent to Wisconsinites. One is people that abuse their power to harass and intimidate their employees. They're refusing to comply with open records about that. That is disgusting enough. The second thing that they refused to comply with the state's strongest open records law in the nation regarding was their manufacturing of predetermined legislative districts guaranteed to give them nearly autocratic control in perpetuity in the state of Wisconsin, thereby flouting the overall intent and will of Wisconsin voters. That's thing two. And then if that wasn't bad enough, they doubled down on that in the wake of the 2020 election, appointed a nutbag who is a crappy lawyer and was a crappy justice and who doesn't, by his own admission, know anything about elections to run a fraud-based investigation, if you can even call it that. I'm going to call it a fraudulent conspiracy on Wisconsin taxpayers, again, to flout the intention of Wisconsin voters. So you have a Republican legislature led by Robin Vos, Scott Fitzgerald and the like now in the U.S. Congress that wants to protect those that abuse power and wants to protect the process by which they flout the intent of Wisconsin voters. And they're doing that in straight up violation of Wisconsin open records law. And somehow this is defensible behavior? No way. No way.
Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates. That's our pal, Maggie Daun. You can join us today on the phones at 844-967-2789. Gableman. Okay, so if we talk about the open records, he's no longer the special counsel, right? He's long gone. So this is now legacy situations that Speaker Vos is continuing to appeal. He's appealing this because what? He doesn't like the payout, the attorney's fees, even though he himself is paying attorney's fees, or we as a taxpayers.
For the appeal,
right?
Like,
higher than the hourly rate for those that won the case for the open records.
Yeah, so he's paying his lawyers more than what the lawyers that are seeking the records are getting paid, but he ends up having to pay both sets of lawyers because if you lose open records cases in the state of Wisconsin, you have to pay the other side's lawyers. Okay? So again, how anyone stands behind an argument that Wisconsin taxpayers and voters aren't entitled to Gableman's documents is shocking enough. He destroyed documents intentionally. You cannot do that in government in the state of Wisconsin. I advise my clients all the time, do not destroy any records. Just don't do it. I don't care if you've got notepads full of stuff. Don't destroy the records. We can deal with them. And then he's doubling down on the appeal. It's just, it boggles the mind at some level. If you just forget which party is which, just think about what it is and what their argument is, that we're not entitled to those documents. And I see no basis for it.
So the next time I hear a Republican talk about transparent and honest government, or the next time I hear a Republican talk about fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, they're lying.
They're lying.
Yeah, it's just a lie. If you cared about those things, you would have released the Gableman records. If you cared about these things, you wouldn't try to hide the bad behavior of sexual harassers. If you cared about transparency and fiscal responsibility, you wouldn't try to hide how you've created the maps. If there's no there, turn the stuff over.
Maggie Daun, the friend of the devil for the day. You can join us on the phones, 844-967-2789. We got a big election coming up. Dan Kelly, Judge Janet Protese. Let's want to talk about that a little bit when we come back, folks. Stick around.
Hi, I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you prevent wildfires.
Dude, I've got this. I've been camping since I was 5 years old.
But I am a camping influencer.
You know what? I'll bet you $5. Assistant Smokey, what is the best way to put out a campfire?
To put out a campfire, drown with water, stir, drown again. Then make sure the fire is out cold by feeling with the back of your hand.
Wait, really?
I'll take the $5.
Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Douglas LaFollette, welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show.
Good to be here, Mike. Across the country, in most every state, the Secretary of State is the person who is in charge of the election. And we've seen lots of hanky-panky in Florida back during the Al Gore elections, in Ohio and Georgia and Arizona and Michigan.
We appreciate you coming around, sir.
Check out the entire podcast library at darnwi.com. Life had a remote control. You could pause or rewind. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. Take the 1-minute risk test today at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Weather on this snowy day in Madison could be brought to us by your pizza delivery business. Can you imagine how many families are snuggled in their homes enjoying hot, tasty pizza? Weather makes the phone ring for just $199 per week. Call us at 608-819-8255.
Here's your Mad Radio forecast. Overcast skies tonight with a low of 20. Winds out of the northeast, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies tomorrow, daytime highs approaching 34. Overcast tomorrow night, snow likely, lows around 30. Upper 30s Sunday with a chance of snow, upper 20s Monday. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow night through Sunday night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Derek Height. Currently, it's 33 degrees.
Think you know politics? Think again. Welcome to the Devil's Advocates.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. That's the 420 break. I want to give a quick shout out to my pal, Jim, turning 72 today. Happy birthday, Jim. My understanding, he's going to be 420 and up right about now, so save one for me, man.
Right.
I mean, God, how old am I getting? Well, I got friends that are 72 years old, man. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I got them all across the age spectrum, young to old. If you think well, I will hang with you.
Right on, sister.
Even if you disagree with me, if you think well,
Yep.
The point is the thinking, right?
Good point. 844-967-2789. Let's talk about these Republicans that maybe don't think too well. Dan Kelly.
Or at all.
Dan Kelly. Now, I wanted to, since this came out, Megan, I've been dying to get your take on it. Dan Kelly on the payroll for the Wisconsin GOP and the RNC to the tune of like 120 grand. He was still cashing those checks when he declared his candidacy for the Wisconsin Supreme Court. A position that he was appointed to, not elected to, and then got his ass whooped when he came up for election that time. And it's not just, working, guys got to work. I understand that. But specifically, he was apparently advising on the fraudulent elector scheme
right.
for the Wisconsin GOP and the RNC. Counselor, what are your thoughts on that? He apparently won't tell us anything about it because of attorney-client privilege. But he was part of that. How do we find out what he did and how it applies?
Yeah, crime fraud exception. You do not get to conspire with your clients to commit, violent overthrow of the government and treason, which is what that was. I think the fact that Judge Protasewicz came out and unequivocally said, I'll recuse if the Democratic Party of Wisconsin shows up as a party in a lawsuit if I'm elected to the Supreme Court. And Dan Kelly did what we all knew that he would do and said, I'll look at it on a case-by-case basis. What? You just worked for these people and they paid you. They're just buying ad time for Janet. And like the Republican Party and the E-lines, they're buying ad time for you. So the exactly precise analogy to what Judge Janet has said, I'll clearly recuse myself, no questions asked. Dan Kelly won't make that same promise to Wisconsin voters that he will put faith in the integrity of the judicial system and fairness above his personal political interests. Again, I don't know how you can vote for this person in good conscience. He told us that he is a partisan and will follow partisan expectations as a justice because he said during the primary that part out loud. He said, you can't vote for Jennifer Doro because she'll turn into another Hagedorn, and don't worry, I won't do that. And by that he means a judge that will follow his conscience and the law to reach decisions. What he's saying is don't vote for Doro because she won't do everything that the Republican Party wants when cases are brought before the court. And now he won't even match the promise that his competitor has made to recuse himself. And he made money from the very party, both national and state, engaged in treasonous plots to interrupt the legal transfer of power. Okay. Why is this guy not being brought before the Office of Lawyer Regulation, which would, if they actually sanctioned him and maybe, suspended his license for a while, might make him ineligible to serve on the Supreme Court? You could actually imagine a circumstance so absurd that heaven help us, if there is such a thing, Dan Kelly were to beat Janet Protasewicz, he could be sitting on the court and facing an OLR inquiry. And who decides the ultimate OLR? Because they can recommend whatever sanctions, but then the person who's sanctioned, the lawyer that's sanctioned, gets to appeal it. And guess where it goes? The Supreme Court.
Right.
You think Dan Kelly would recuse himself from his own OLR sanction hearing? I don't know. Maybe not. If he can get paid from the old GOP and the RNC and not recuse himself ASAP from that case, I don't think he's copacetic, right? That's not above board. That's a guy who'll trade his soul to get elected and to further his own personal religious and political agenda. Because he went to, that really top tier law school.
Top tier. Christian Broadcasting Network School of Law.
Right.
I might have maybe been able to get into that one. Maybe.
Oh, you would have been able to do much better than that.
Yes, all right. We just got a couple minutes left in this segment. Maggie Daun, our guest today. It's not only, so the work thing and the influence thing, it's also literally he has a track record. We talked to Dan Lenz recently from Law Forward, and they put together a list. And you were talking about these other conservatives on the court that didn't agree with them all these times, or they wrote their own opinion because they want anything to do with the crap that Kelly is putting out there. What was your thought on the critique of Dan Kelly by the other conservatives on the court?
Well, I think that's really says more than perhaps any conservative would give you or I credit for. When your own team is saying you're far too compromised to be able to do this job with any level of public trust, which is, as a government official, I hold my job in public trust. It is not about me. And if I lose the trust and faith of either my clients or the public in doing that job, and I've been subject to some criticism that's been public, I will resign my position, right? If I'm so compromised that people think that I can't fulfill the duties of my job objectively and to the betterment of Milwaukee County, I'm gone.
Yeah, but he doesn't. He actually tries, and his process, his thinking is flawed. That's why these other conservatives are writing their own briefs, because they're like, I can't sign off on what Dan Kelly.
That's so. One of the things that I like to always check myself is, am I humble enough to actually look at this from a completely different perspective and entertain the question, what if I'm wrong? And the problem with people like Dan Kelly and his ilk is that they've so wrapped up their view of the world and his judicial philosophy with their religion, which they possibly cannot ever challenge, right? Because it would fundamentally alter their whole understanding of themselves and their place in this world. He will never entertain the thought, what if I'm wrong? That is exactly the opposite thing that you need in a Supreme Court justice. We need humble people who will follow the law, not their own religious beliefs, and certainly not the people that have bought and paid for them.
Dan Kelly, strong and wrong. Of course, very serious issues to address. Let's talk about the abortion on the other side of this break. You can join us, 844-967-2789.
There's a complete lack of respect for the law.
The Civic Media Network of radio stations across Wisconsin. We are your hometown radio, refreshed.
ABC News, I'm Dave Packer. Nearly 36 counties in California now under an emergency disaster declaration issued by President Biden due to recent snowstorms. Officials are urging residents to remain alert as a new storm moves in and could trigger a whole new set of problems for the state. Mike Keever is Caltrans Chief Deputy Director.
This heavy, warm rain combined with accumulated snowfall is leading to the risk of flooding, rock, and mudslides.
Residents in mountain communities are still trying to dig out. Businesses added 311,000 jobs last month, more than analysts expected. The Fed board is trying to cool the labor market to help tame inflation. That means another interest rate hike could come later this month. California regulators stepped in today, closing Silicon Valley Bank after it failed The FDIC is taking over the bank that served as a major lender for startup tech companies. It's the biggest bank failure since 2008. This is ABC News.
Broadcasting to Madison from State Street, broadcasting to the world on the Civic Media app. This is Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX.
For Civic Media News, I'm Terry Bell. Here's what you need to know. Wisconsin's unemployment rate was 2.9% in January. Workforce development officials say Wisconsin businesses created 4,800 private sector jobs in the first month of the year. The national jobless rate was 3.4%. Foxconn and We Energies want to build a solar panel farm in Mount Pleasant. Civic Media's Melissa Kay reports.
The project would generate enough energy to power about 300 homes. Foxconn is touting the project as one of the largest non-residential solar projects in Racine County. Kelly Gallagher, running for Mount Pleasant Village President, says this doesn't fulfill any of the promises that Foxconn made to the community. I'm Melissa Kay.
In sports, Marquette plays UConn in the Big East Tournament semifinals tonight. I'm Terry Bell, and this is Civic Media News.
The Civic Media team would like to say congratulations. More than 200 Wisconsin businesses and nonprofits are receiving a free advertising campaign through our one-day $1 million advertising giveaway. If you missed out, our local sales team would still love to help you with your own campaign. Go to civicmedia.us and click on the sponsorship tab. Again, civicmedia.us and sponsorship. New and still growing. Advertise today with a Civic Media network of radio stations.
Hey, Darcy, I just saw the perfect house. Can you help me write an offer on it?
I'd be happy to, Brian. Did you see it at an open house?
No, I just called the sign and had the agent show it to me. I didn't want to bug you.
Right. How many times have you heard me say don't call the sign?
All of them.
You called the agent working for the seller, and once you see the property with that agent, I'm no longer free to write an offer on it.
So...
You need to hire us from the beginning, help you find the right home, negotiate on your behalf, and protect your interests all the way through the process, and it shouldn't cost you a dime.
Solidarity Realty. They're real, they're solid, and they're honest. Find them at solidarityrealty.com.
From the kennel to the coop, whatever the season, Fleet Farm has everything to keep your animals happy and healthy. From training your pup to sit season, to mastering those retrieval skills season. From clipping your horse for competition season, to keeping the backyard birds well-fed season. And of course, loving your pets like family season. There's a reason people say, if Fleet Farm doesn't have it, you don't need it. Because we have it all. Fleet Farm, built for real life.
I love this song! I love nachos.
Loving everything? You might be buzzed.
You know what I'd love? A ride when it's time to head out.
If you see a buzzed warning sign, call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
The Devil's Advocates, radio for the 99%.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Happy Friday to us all. You can join us on the lines, air your grievances, contribute to the conversation, 844-967-2789. Maggie Daun, Milwaukee County Corporate Counsel, friend of the Devil's Advocates, host of Dawn of the Resistance.
former host.
a Wisconsin Broadcasters Association champion.
Well, if you insist.
Can't believe we took
Still
second.
hurts, doesn't it?
A little bit. But there's a reason for me, because you are awesome. And I wanted to get your sense. We talked about, of course, this very important Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Dan Kelly, Jenna Protaseo. It's abortion. Big issues, right? Still driving the conversation, not only in the state, but certainly in the country. And I've seen some testimony that's very unsettling. About what some women had to go through, I believe it was in Texas, before they could actually get the surgery to basically save their lives. I know you got the details on it, Maggie. Why don't you share with the audience?
Sure. So just this past week, 5 women, residents of the state of Texas, along with 2 Texas physicians, obstetrics physicians, filed suit to try to challenge Texas's abortion law. So let's just put a pin in it. And I want to explain, before we get to these women's individual experiences, I want to just take a moment to explain, like, wait a minute, people might be thinking, didn't the Supreme Court just say that states can ban abortion? So how could they be challenging this abortion ban in Texas?
It's a great question, Maggie Daun.
So you still have to write laws that are sufficiently clear so that people can understand what conduct is permitted and not permitted.
So I'll pause right there.
Yep.
In Wisconsin, we already had a law on the book that was now referred to. Did Texas have something similar?
Yeah, they did have what's called basically a trigger ban that went into effect as soon as the Dobbs decision itself basically took effect. There was a couple of more days for some technicalities which aren't relevant for our discussion
Sure.
now. But their ban does not date back to before women had the right to vote.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, way to go,
Just-
Texas.
Yeah. So they had actually crafted a ban in anticipation,
Gotcha.
okay,
Yep.
of the Dobbs decision. One has to wonder, might someone have leaked some information to Texas?
Who would have possibly done something like that? I know they're looking into it, Maggie. I'm looking forward to hearing what that report ends up showing.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. Just to engage in this tangent for a second, because it is so important. There's been an allegation made by a former conservative, big right winger, who sort of ended up in the same circles with Samuel Alito. Why was he able to do that? Because the Supreme Court set up a slush fund to like fund their library and stuff, and basically conservative donors use that to gain access to the court. This guy's claiming that Alito basically dropped the hint, let them know what was coming on Dobbs. So that's a whole nother show, Dom. Ethics for judges?
Expand the court.
Yeah, right. Term limits. But to return. So
Yes.
Texas enacted a law to ban abortion in anticipation of Dobbs. Its language is bad.
Yeah,
So
okay.
laws, in order to be enforceable, have to be not vague, right? And so claims can be made that a law is effectively void for vagueness because it inhibits people's choices and behaviors in a way that may reach well beyond what the law was actually meant to prohibit. Of course, you also have this weirdness in Texas where they've incentivized others to effectively enforce the law. There's lots of weird stuff baked
Like
into
civilians can bring complaints against other civilians for violating this law and collect like a reward.
Yes, they've monetarily incented neighbors to rat out neighbors, brothers to rat out sisters, mothers to rat out daughters. It's a lovely place, that Texas. Second, probably only to none, but maybe second to Florida. Again, another topic for
Right.
another day.
So much to talk
I
about.
know, right? Mike, stay on vacation. I kid. So there's lots of things that are problematic about the particularities of Texas's law. And so this lawsuit is challenging it on a number of those bases. One, that it is void for vagueness. And part of the way that you would articulate those arguments is by laying out the circumstances of women who ended up in, frankly, life-threatening circumstances because their physicians and other healthcare professionals had no idea what exactly was prohibited and what wasn't. The way that this is talked about colloquially is often like fetal heartbeat ban, like the heartbeat rule. You have to, if there's a heartbeat, you can't do an abortion. Well, what's an abortion? Well, there's a whole bunch of different procedures that maybe are considered abortion. A lot of laws just define it as bringing a fetus's life to an end. Again, you can see where this gets really messy. And
Sure.
so while it is one thing to talk about the fact that this puts women's lives at risk, it's another to see it written out in a legal filing, which again dropped on March 6th at 6:30 p.m. In Travis County, Texas. And the five women, Amanda, and they've agreed to have their names in this. I'm not sort of talking out of turn. It's Amanda Zerwiski, Lauren Miller, Lauren Hall, Anna Zargarian, and Ashley Brandt. And I'll send this to your producer so you can post it on your website.
Yeah,
so
please
people
do.
can, and I encourage people, even those who are staunchly pro-life, to pick this up and to read it,
Ugh.
okay? And to read what has happened to some of these women. And then I want you to think, how do I craft a law? If you read this and you say, clearly those women should have been able to access health care,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Should have been able to terminate a pregnancy. How do you write the law to make sure that it's like the right people that can get an abortion? And this is how you start to know that laws are stupid, okay? Is when you start to try to think about how to word it and the different factual scenarios that can come up. And I promise you, you try to word these bans differently, the next lawsuit like this one will be filed with just as egregious facts where women are forced into decisions where their healthcare professionals are giving them the freaking silent treatment, which you hear in all 5 of these stories. They are left alone, crying, and in danger of their lives with no one advising them about what they can do. Okay.
What
no
a
matter,
terrible circumstance to possibly be in.
correct. And this is about protecting life.
Right.
So I urge you to read their stories. We'll talk about them a bit because I think it's important to say these things out loud. But I challenge you to think about, how do you so carefully circumscribe a law? Rape, incest, or the life of the mother? Well, the life of the mother when? Like before she gets septic or after and she's actually in the process of dying? Well, what if they're twins and one fetus is going to die, and if that fetus isn't aborted, it might kill the mother and the other? Like,
It's a flow chart. It's a Texas flow
Right?
chart. Yes, yes.
These are the sorts of things that indicate so strongly, if you have any legal integrity or moral integrity for that matter, that this is an area that is beyond government regulation because it is so rife with gray area, right? So I felt compelled during this week of International Women's Day to share a bit of these women's stories with our listeners. And again, I'll send over the PDF. I'm sure you guys can get up for Monday at least.
Yeah, folks,
so that people can read it if they wish.
You're listening to the Devil's Advocates. That is Maggie Daun, Milwaukee County Corporate Counsel, joining me as co-devil. Let's get to some of the terrible details, if you would, please, Maggie.
Yeah. And again, I don't mean to share these things out of pure interest or shock value, but I think it's really important for people to confront what these abortion restrictions and bans actually do in practice.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about, taking these arguments like out of the theoretical and frankly out of churches and into science-based reality and healthcare realities for women, their partners, and fetuses, frankly, and the doctors that have to serve in this quagmire of unclear laws that have very little practical meaning. So the first plaintiff, her name is Amanda, Zurowski, I think. And she's 35. She, her and her husband have known each other since preschool, which I thought was an interesting fact that they included. Married in 2019. They've been trying to have children since they got married. She went through 1.5 years of fertility treatments. For those of you who struggle with fertility, it can be a painful, extraordinarily expensive road, which, by the way, I don't know why insurance isn't forced to cover fertility treatments. But again, topic number 3 for the next show, right? Her pregnancy proceeded without incident until at 17 weeks. Again, that's after the 15-week ban, which is sort of the oft-cited construction. Sometimes they go back to at least 12 weeks.
So regardless of the other language in Texas, it's a 15-week ban.
Correct.
Okay.
So she's just over the 15. So she's at 17 weeks, 6 days. She was diagnosed with an incompetent cervix, which is a weakening of cervical tissue that causes premature dilation, which can lead to way, way, way early childbirth. Because her pregnancy was still so many weeks before viability, she was told that her baby would not survive. She kept asking if there was anything that her doctors could do. She specifically asked if she was a candidate for cerclage, a procedure where a patient's cervix is stitched closed to prevent preterm birth. Her doctors told her that unfortunately her membranes were already prolapsing, and they go on. They basically describe a bit of the extraordinary measures that she and her husband went through to try to save this pregnancy. However, her water eventually broke. Again, this is well before fetal viability.
Yeah.
Out of the womb, right? Amanda returned to the ER that night, diagnosed with preterm, pre-label rupture of membranes, or PROM, PPROM is what that's referred to, because her amniotic fluid had entirely drained when her water broke. The emergency room kept her overnight in the hopes that she would go into labor on her own, because then when the baby would be born dead, we're fine. I just want to be clear about that. In the morning, however, she had not gone into labor. Her baby still had cardiac activity and her vitals were still stable. The reason that I say that her baby would have been born dead is that as soon as the baby is detached because of the the character of the uterus and everything, that the baby would die during birth. So she wakes up in the morning, her baby still has some cardiac activity, and the mother's vitals were stable, meaning she was not yet showing signs of infection or labor actually starting to occur. She was told that the hospital could provide no other care at this point in time under the Texas abortion ban. That means every single healthcare provider in the room knows your baby's going to be dead, and we're just waiting either until you start childbirth and they won't induce, or you start to turn septic and get infected, and now you're at risk of dying and we can abort the
Then
fetus.
we can finally do something.
Yep, but until then,
we
we're
know it's
just
going
gonna
to
sit
happen.
here-
We know
Yes.
that certain
It's
things are
those-
going
the
to
only
happen.
two options,
But until they
basically.
actually happen,
Yeah, we can't do anything, and we can't really tell you anything. Before the ban, she would have been offered an abortion or transferred to a facility that could offer the procedure. She was offered neither, okay, because the hospital was concerned about the ban. She was told that delivery could take hours, days, or weeks. She would have the choice weeks. So she could either stay in the hospital in case she starts to turn septic immediately. They could save her life, because if you turn septic and you're hours away from a hospital, you dead, right? So she has no idea how long it's going to take. She decided then that it was time to travel to another state for an abortion. She looked it up. The closest abortion provider to drive was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's 11 hours of a drive. The specialist at the hospital urged Amanda to stay within a 15-minute drive of the hospital in case her health deteriorated quickly. On Wednesday morning, Amanda was sent home with instructions to monitor herself for sign of infection. She spent the next 2 days at home grieving her inevitable loss of her baby and worrying about her health. On Thursday morning, during this whole thing, the trigger ban actually went into effect. So before the ban actually went into effect, she still couldn't get the health care that she needed because they were so afraid. The providers were so afraid. She went for a checkup the next day. Her vitals were stable. She's on her way home from the doctor's office. She started to develop chills and shivering. By the time she got home, she had a temperature of 101 degrees, and she could not verbally respond to her husband's questions. She's septic now. Her husband calls the OB, and while he's waiting for a call back, he decides he can't wait any longer, takes her to the ER. When she gets to the ER, Amanda has a temperature of 102 degrees. It ends up peaking at 103.2.
Wow.
She's confirmed to be septic. She's put on antibiotics. The hospital, the healthcare team finally agreed that she was sick enough that they wouldn't and couldn't induce labor, and that inducing labor to then effectively abort the fetus would not violate the law because her life was finally enough at risk. It was enough at risk. So she actually gave birth to her baby, and the baby passed away. I'm going to tell you the rest of Amanda's story when we get back after break, because we need to hear this.
We'll be right back.
What grows in the forest? Our imagination and our family bonds. The forest is closer than you think. Find a forest near you at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
The Devil's Advocates, because freedom.
But Dom, we've been following a couple of big stories this week. Truck convoy leader has no idea where he is and is driving in circles around I-495. He didn't know precisely where he was going anyways, or where he was at the time. Apparently, he put the convoy back on the road, headed back up north, and he's back in Scranton. So
I totally would have protested this tyranny, but damn, the traffic was so bad.
Follow the Devil's Advocates on Facebook and Twitter.
How was your drive to school?
Let me tell you, I had to get my iced coffee first. I just can't seem to put it down. My favorite rapper just announced a tour. My phone was buzzing like crazy. I'm so excited. I had to text all my friends right then to talk about it. Then someone started calling me, and
Let's try that again.
I turned my phone off right away. I never drive distracted.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Weather on this snowy day could be brought to us by your business. Can you imagine how many snow blowers, snow shovels, and snowmobiles are being sold as we speak? Weather sponsorships make the phone ring. Call us at 608-819-8255.
Here's your Mad Radio forecast. Overcast skies tonight with lows around 20. Northeast winds 5 to 10 miles an hour. Overcast tomorrow. High temperatures reach up to 34. Cloudy again tomorrow night. Snow likely 30. Upper 30s Sunday with a chance for snow. Low 30s Monday. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow night through Sunday night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Eric Height. Currently, it's 33 degrees.
The Devil's Advocates, radio for the 99%.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Phone lines are open. We'll get to them today at 844-967-2789. In the meantime, our pal here, Maggie Daun, Milwaukee County Corporate Counsel, going through some of these just devastating stories about what women experiences in Texas and having to literally go through sepsis and life-threatening behavior activities until before Texas law would allow the medical community to address the very dangerous issues. Maggie, please continue.
Yeah, so we had gotten to the place where Amanda was denied, frankly, just denied the health care that her and frankly her fetus deserved, right? Until she became septic and nonverbal and had to be rushed to the hospital. She had a fever that peaked around over 103 degrees. Her baby was born effectively dead, stillborn. So that night, she's trying to recover from all of this, including the emotional devastation. I mean,
Right.
can you imagine,
No.
like, your baby's not going to make it, and you have to deal with that, and then on top of that,
You might
for
not make it.
Amanda, yes, for days she went through this agony. So she's now in the hospital trying to process all of this. Her blood and platelet levels were really low, so it looked like that first septic or whatever other infection had passed, but there were still some weird biometric indicators. So she stays there. And then that evening, she basically develops a second infection, also becomes septic, and she ends up in the ICU. I mean, so now she's basically near death for the second time. In total, she was in the ICU for 3 days. And of course, her family had to fly in apparently they were from one of the coasts, had to fly in. Her family was there because they thought she was going to die. And this death would have been because Texas decided that it's more important for mostly white, rich, old men of a particular religious persuasion to tell all women in Texas what's good for them in all circumstances. She eventually recovers and returns home. That's the only reason that she's in this complaint, mind you. I have to point that out, Dom. It's so important because if the women who died and there have to be women who have died in Texas and probably Wisconsin, but they can't give their permission to become a plaintiff. So the only stories you'll ever hear in these lawsuits, people, will be the women that survived. You won't hear from the dead ones. So she eventually came home, but what had happened to her body was so extreme from the infections, and that this means her reproductive tract, her reproductive organs were what was infected, right? The scar tissue was so extreme in her uterus and on her fallopian tubes that she couldn't get an x-ray of her reproductive organs. Like, that's how extensive the scarring was. And so she underwent a surgery to try to attempt to remove some of the scar tissue. And while her physicians were able to clear her uterus and one fallopian tube, the other fallopian tube is so scarred that it is permanently closed. And now she's begun IVF treatments again. Okay? There are 4 other stories in this complaint and the stories from 2 physicians and what they've seen their patients going through. And I want to emphasize again, the only women that you will hear from in these lawsuits are the ones that lived. So it challenges me on a really baseline level that this debate has gotten so reductivist, right? And it's you're either a good Christian or you're a terrible sinner who wants to promote rampant sex. Oh, no, wait, that's Dan Kelly that thinks that that's what women's healthcare choice is about. And by the way, Dan, if I don't believe the same crap you do, maybe rampant sex is just fine where I come from, because I thought our laws were about freedom of choice, except when those choices are things like guns. We can't do that.
No.
But we can deny women health care. I don't know about you, but that's like a bridge too far for me.
The situation, and thank you for highlighting a very important point, Maggie Daun, that the dead tell no tales. You know what I'm saying? There's no testimony. You're not going to hear the specifics and the agony of not just someone who was gone through that, had the infection, and came out of it, but went the next step, didn't make it.
Right.
What was going through their head?
Right.
God, I wish I lived in California. You know what I mean? Because this is all entirely preventable. The medical community could step up and absolutely handle the situation. And if it means an abortion, then it means an abortion. And she can go, and her family can go and try again. They wanted kids.
Yes.
They want to do this, and she's going through fertility again after all of this.
Yep.
That is just stunning.
It really is. And again, let's just remember here, Ron Johnson's solution is women just move somewhere else. That was Ron Johnson's
It'll get a little
response.
messy for a minute, but then they can just leave if they don't like it.
Yeah, just leave. I explaining this or saying that this is that these bans that are worded in a way that make it impossible to understand what is prohibited and what is not. And by the way, you can never word this ban carefully enough. That is what tells you that you have to let people in consultation with their own religious leaders, their own family, and their own doctors make these decisions. I don't know how you look at these cases like this and say, I got no problem with that. My religion requires me to let women die, to let twins, paired fetuses, let one of the babies die. I don't get it. And by the way, two of the stories in this complaint are women with twins, where basically one of the twins was certain to die. That fetus was certain to die. And they ended up in, again, situations where they were septic, and it risked the life of the twin that was viable, the twin that could survive.
Right.
So I just don't think the moral argument holds up under scrutiny. And I think this case, and there's thousands of these stories, right? So I challenge people that say this is what my religion requires. Really? Is it? I don't know about that, God. I don't know about that, God.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. That is my guest devil of the day, Maggie Daun, Milwaukee County Corporate Counsel. We're going to come back after this break. We're going to take some of your calls at 844-967-2789. Judge Janet Protasewicz has come out and said she's pro-choice. I mean, she's made very clear on that. Dan Kelly thinks that all you whores just want to have abortions so you can have sex.
Yes.
Because, all you need is an aspirin.
Which, P.S., I bet he thinks the same thing about contraception and sex education. What might Dan Kelly ban next?
We don't want to find out.
No, we do not
want to find out. Maggie, thank you for that. Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates. We're going to come back, take more of your calls, and, of course, get to the Fox News, the Trumpy stuff.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll kick it up.
Yeah, we're going to bring it the happier happy hour.
Right.
Starts next. We promise. Stick around. We'll be right back.
When it's raining cats and dogs, your business can rain profits. Sponsoring the weather forecasts on your local Civic Media station will get your phone to ring.
Listeners pay attention to weather forecasts, and they'll pay attention to your message.
Act now, because we're slashing prices up to 50% on these premium sponsorships.
But the deals absolutely end March 15th.
Log on to civicmedia.us/weather now. That's civicmedia.us/weather. Sponsoring our forecasts is the Cat's Meow.
10 years ago, we opened with a single location. We had one glass blower, that's me, and a full display of artistically created glass pipes and products. Today, you've helped us grow to 3 successful locations. Ignite Glass and Gifts thanks you for your continued support. We'll be here as long as you need us. Madison's favorite for glass gifts and vape. Ignite Glass and Gifts, Monona Drive, Williamson Street, and Odana Road. 1 solid decade. Man, does that feel good.
You're listening to Mad Radio, WMDX 1580 AM Columbus, W224EG Madison, and always streaming on the Civic Media app.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. President Biden's issued a disaster declaration for 34 counties in California following historic storms that have dumped record snowfall in mountain communities from San Bernardino County to Lake Tahoe. A new storm now slamming California. State Emergency Services Director Nancy Ward urging people to stay safe.
15 shelters open in 9 counties, more than 9,400 people under evacuation orders, approximately 54,000 plus people without power, and unfortunately 2 deaths that have so far been confirmed by the coroner's office to be storm-related.
In Germany, police say total deaths from yesterday's mass shooting at a church in Hamburg, now 5. One of the injured is a pregnant woman. She miscarried after the shooting. The latest monthly jobs report from the Labor Department showing 311,000 added in February, higher than projected. This is ABC News. The alleged presence of 2 secret Chinese police stations in Quebec being investigated by Canadian officials. Police telling ABC News Chinese Canadians have been victims of possible intimidation and harassment by the 2 centers. China now accusing Canada of smearing its reputation. A preview of this weekend's Academy Awards.
Sunday night's Oscars come a year after last year's show was eclipsed by a slap. Will Smith hitting Chris Rock after a joke about Smith's wife's short hair. Rock's Netflix special last weekend reopened the wound, so is it something that gets mentioned Sunday night or ignored?
We're going to acknowledge it, and then we're going to move on.
Oscars executive producer Molly McNearney says that's her sense of what people want, especially those that'll be inside the Dolby Theater.
We don't want to make this year about last year.
She says it'll be addressed in a
comedic fashion.
Jason Nathanson, ABC News. Hollywood.
The Cincinnati Zoo now taking in cocaine cat, a wild African serval cat captured in January with cocaine in his system. They say he'd escaped from his owner's car. Chuck Severson, ABC News.
Missed your favorite show? It's easy to find it wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Google, or civicmedia.us.
For Civic Media News, I'm Terry Bell. Here's what you need to know. More than 100,000 homes and businesses. That's how many lost power in the latest snowstorm to Wallop, Wisconsin. The southeast got the worst of it. There are several reports of tree limbs and power lines giving out under heavy snow. It's a snow day for several schools around Wisconsin. Others started late or went remote. A state appeals court rules the Wisconsin Assembly broke the open records law when it first denied a media request for documents relating to a former state lawmaker accused of sexual harassment. That happened in 2019. The court's ruling says the Assembly owes the Journal Sentinel, the State Journal, and other news organizations their lawyers' fees. In sports, Marquette plays UConn in the Big East Tournament semifinals tonight. I'm Terry Bell, and this is Civic Media News.
Think you'd like working with us at Civic Media? We're having fun and moving fast to preserve hometown radio across Wisconsin. If you have the right skills to join our team, let's talk. Civic Media is a proud equal opportunity employer committed to diversity and inclusion along with the growth and development of all current and future employees. If you're interested or are part of an organization who wants to know more, go to our website, civicmedia.us, and click on the Careers tab.
Your home for local news, weather, and sports across the airwaves and always streaming on the Civic Media app.
Heat, power, and water are things people cannot take for granted. The elderly, disabled, the veterans. With record increases in basic costs of living, people are struggling to keep these services on and their bills paid. If you are in danger of losing heat, power, or water, call 1-800-506-5596 or apply online at heat.help. You may not ask for it, but the Keep Wisconsin Warm Cool Fund and your local energy assistance providers are here to help.
Hello, listeners. This is Corey Bang from Civic Media. I'm glad that you're joining me today on the community calendar. Here are some community events for all you listeners to look forward to. Go check out the talented and legendary comedian Sarah Silverman at the Orpheum Theater on March 9th. Show starts at 7 o'clock p.m. On March 10th, stop on into the Stoughton Opera House to see the exciting Dozen Brass Band. Show starts at 7 o'clock p.m. You also cannot forget about the world's largest kayak, canoe, and water sports show, Canoecopia, all weekend from March 10th through March 12th. That's taking place at the Alliant Energy Center. This is Corey Bang, and you're listening to this week's Community Calendar. If you're interested in submitting your next local community event, contact me at corey.bank@civicmedia.us. Again, it's corey.bank@civicmedia.us, or you can contact us at 608-819-8255. Let your hometown know what's going on today.
Go by any construction site in Wisconsin, you're going to see a lot of Michaels trucks. Since 2014, they've had more than $1 billion worth of contracts with the state government.
A large part of those coming with Foxconn without any results in that area.
Do we want a governor who might be giving his brothers the contract? I think he needs to answer that before the election.
We'll just kick that one down the road. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But of course, Michaels Corporation would get to build that said bridge.
Listen Monday through Friday from 2 to 3. It's Dueling Tangents.
Mad Radio 92.7 programming is produced live in the Solidarity Realty Studios. Solidarity Realty, there is an alternative.
Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves and corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. 3, 2, 1. Now live from the Devil Radio Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning. Welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Here is your host, Mike Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. I am your host, Dominic Salvia Crute. He's still on vacation, but we are rolling into the happy hour today with our fine guest, Maggie Daun, Milwaukee County Corporate Counsel, sticking around for the happy hour. Maggie, thank you for doing so, and let's make it happy. Pretty heavy conversation on the abortion issues. Thank you for the clarity. Yep. Folks, very important. Stay on that topic. It will continue to drive politics in this country until we get it right. I know we have some callers waiting on that at 844-967-2789. But this is a new hour. It's a new day. I want to get to at least one of the main headlines here. I saw this one from last night, the Washington Post reporting, New York prosecutors offer Trump a chance to testify before the grand jury. I mean, a chance to testify. Hey, congratulations.
Right.
Come down to half court.
You may have won $1 million.
You can take a shot at the half court and win a car.
Right. Or you may be facing felony charges that have a maximum penalty of up to 4 years in New York State prison. Sing, sing, here he comes.
I mean, what a grand opportunity for the former president. I know he's been out there claiming his innocence. I'm sure he'll run to the grand jury to
put his hand on a Bible, swear under oath, and be like,
he loves all the parts of the Bible. He doesn't want to get into which ones. It's all very important
to
him.
He's like Palin in that way. She loves
all the books,
all of the books, all of the papers.
So finally, something happened. We got lots of different, areas of Trump and illegalities, but this one now resurrected. Cy Vance retired. Alvin Bragg took over as Manhattan DA. Yep. A couple of the top prosecutors, they quit. They were mad that Alvin Bragg didn't jump on it immediately. Not clear how all that went down, but seemingly, Bragg got a couple of convictions on Trump corporations for fraud. They paid a big fine, and now they're continuing this one. The Stormy Daniels sex. No, it's not the sex. It's the payoff. It's the crime involved in keeping her quiet and how it was booked, how it was distributed, and what it did to further other crimes, perhaps. Maggie Daun, I was ecstatic. Finally, something maybe.
Something happening?
What's your sense?
So if it's all right now, first, let's just be sure people understand the facts of the thing that occurred, right?
Okay.
So this is back during the presidential election. It's right at the very tail end of it. The Access Hollywood tape has broken, so that's already out there, okay? Trump had been working with the CEO of the National Enquirer to effectively catch and kill a story about another sex worker with whom he had an affair. So they caught and killed the story, which means the guy buys the exclusive rights to it and then never publishes the story. Along comes Stormy Daniels. She's trying to sell her story to the National Enquirer. National Enquirer calls up DJT. You got a problem here, man? And so what does DJT do? He calls his trusty friend, Michael Cohen.
The fixer.
The fixer. And I mean, if you've not heard this guy talk, he sounds like a fixer. If I had to hire a fixer, I'm like, I want Mike Cohen. He's my guy. Calls up Mike Cohen, and instead of doing a catch and kill, Mike Cohen writes Stormy Daniels a check from the Trump organization for $130,000.
If I recall, the reason that Mike Cohen did the transaction that way was because Donald Trump never paid the dude from the magazine on the first catch and kill.
Right.
So he wasn't going to do a second one. So then he had to create some reason, some ruse to make her go away.
Right. So we've got the money from the Trump organization that goes to Stormy Daniels. There is an invoice that is created that says this is for legal services provided by Michael Cohen.
So the fixer creates a fraudulent invoice,
Yep.
submits it to the Trump organization, gets paid by
and
it.
Eventually, Donald Trump, while sitting in the White House, writes Michael Cohen a check for the $130,000.
While in the White House.
While in the Oval Office, to be exactly specific. So the question becomes twofold. One is, did they create a false business record, which is it's actually a crime in New York, which I find, let's just pause here. Can we just say that that probably happens like every minute in New York State?
So they would put it towards, legal. When you make your books and post your expense, you're going to put it as legal expenses because
the
you're cutting it to
organization
Cohen
booked it.
because they don't have a line item for hush money, stripper, porn star payoff expense.
The generally accepted accounting principles don't permit that. Funny. And I did misspeak before. Michael Cohen wrote the check himself, right? It wasn't from the Trump org to Stormy.
Right.
It was
Trump
Michael
to Cohen, Cohen to Stormy.
Right,
yeah.
right. So there's the false business record. Then there's the part where this happened. Literally, the payment was made. In other words, it kept her quiet in the weeks before the election. So there's the false business record, but then there's the question of the election law violation, which is you got something of value to help your election and you didn't disclose it. So those are the two things that are going on here. And the rule for you to commit the election law violation is simply, did it benefit the candidacy? Because I've heard accounts that, well, if I'm Donald Trump's defense attorney, what I say is, oh, no. He wasn't trying to get himself elected president. He was trying to keep Melania from kicking him out of Mar-a-Lago, right? Or the Trump Tower.
right.
He's trying to keep the old wife happy. The law doesn't care whether you intended to benefit your candidacy or not. If it did, and it obviously, no one can argue that keeping an affair from becoming public during a campaign is to a campaign's benefit, it's an election law violation. Then the question, so those are both effectively different misdemeanor bases. But then the question comes, did he then knowingly act and lie to cover up these lower level crimes? And that's where you get potentially into the fraud, and you have to lie and conceal it. The concealment all has to be intentional. And that gets a little, that's why you got the fixer guy. So I think much of this case will depend on whether or not a jury gives a crap. Do they care? Right? And we can talk about whether or not criminally charging someone for falsifying a business record in New York State, where it probably happens all the time, makes sense. But to me, that's sort of the predicate crime that gets you to this potential felony charge.
Because that crime was done in conjunction or furtherance of another crime.
It's never the crime itself. It's always the cover up, right? And so too
it's
here.
It's an enhancer, essentially.
Right. Well, that incorrect business record was the thing that they had to do to make the payoff work, which eventually led to Donald Trump paying him back.
Now, was this part of, because Alvin Bragg, of course, as mentioned before, he got a conviction for Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization, had two of the Trump organizations found guilty.
So let's be careful about that, because that was a civil trial. Weisselberg has pled out on some crimes, right? But the
right, those were was not a criminal.
Correct.
Okay,
it was a civil.
But what
charge.
that did, Discovery allowed a review of the books. You know what I mean? So was that part of this? Is that what you can confirm? Like, oh, okay, now we know this is exactly how this happened because we have access to the books.
Yeah, so they can subpoena anything during an investigatory process if you are acting in a district attorney's office or an attorney general's office. So they were going to be able to get there. The interesting, why is this news now? Right. Like, why does anybody care?
This has been a long time. I mean, hell,
everything's been going on for like
the fixer
2+
who was
years.
Involved in the very same crime that the guy that
has
helped
already
Donald
been
Trump
to prison
and
is
out and released. Right,
That's how long
already. So
ago
this is not new news.
Nope. But the reason that everybody is like really excited about this is because these sorts of prosecutions, the election law violation, the false business record, and then potentially the felony on top of it, the way that these grand jury investigations work is that by law in New York State, the district attorney must provide the target an opportunity to testify.
In front of the grand jury.
Correct. So effectively, it's like, yep, you get to tell
before indicting or
correct.
charging.
You get to before the grand jury is given the case to either bill or no bill.
Right.
Bill meaning, yes, this is a criminal indictment. Before they get the case, the target gets to testify, because if you have a reasonable explanation for all of this stuff,
totally reasonable. Melania would have killed me.
Correct. Of course, it's under oath, and anything that you could say can be used against you, and you don't have to testify. So here's where we are. The thing about these investigations is that no one is asked to testify until basically the investigation is closed, or you're the last thing that's going to happen, and then they're going to give it to the grand jury and they expect to indict. So this means that probably in the next month or so, we're going to see criminal charges brought against Donald Trump. Wow. So this is historic, right? Donald Trump could always say, like, Nixon actually resigned and Bill Clinton was actually impeached, right? So I did it twice. Big diff. Big diff. But this one he can't argue about. This is actually the first time in American history that either a sitting or former president will be charged with a crime. And I want to make this observation before I forget about it, because I think there is some, I don't know, cosmic justice in the world, right? So we know that we've got Fani Willis in Georgia investigating his
11,782
just give me the
votes.
Just find the votes. Oh yes, Fox News. Vote flipping? Yeah, that's what he asked for in Georgia. I digress. Fani Willis, Alvin Bragg, and Tish James, right? These are all black folks. These are all the prosecutors who hold elected offices prosecuting Donald Trump for being exactly who we all know Donald Trump to be. And that's one thing that I just like to step back and say, I advise everybody and clients and people that ask me, how do you pick a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all about the gut, right? At a certain level, it's all about the gut. Does this all sound like stuff that Donald Trump would do?
Right.
Right? Would he do that?
Probably, yes.
He would. Would he incite a mob to try to overthrow the U.S. government to keep himself in power? Yes.
F&A,
yes,
absolutely. Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates. That is Maggie Daun, our pal, our co-devil for the day. We're going to get to your calls as well. It's a glorious, glorious day. Perhaps justice, finally, at least on one case. We got several more out. Let's get your take today. 844-967-2789. Going to the phones after we get back.
I'm Chris Jakimick. I served in the United States Air Force, and I deployed 3 times. being a veteran is interwoven into your DNA. It is really the absence of the connection and the purpose that can really drive a lot of veterans to some negative thoughts. For those who are in a suicidal crisis, the window of time to save somebody's life is very short. Our duty is to protect ourselves and protect our families, and one way you can do that is store your weapons safely. Store all your guns securely. Help stop suicide.
Brought to you by End Family Fire and the Ad Council.
Warning, listening to the Devil's Advocates may expose you to opposing views.
We've mentioned, inflation is going to be an issue. Let me ask you this. What would you like to see Donald Trump do if you were here? What did you suggest Biden do to address the inflationary pressures we're facing right now?
Well, I can't tell you that because that would be something you could counter and defeat Trump with, or the Republican Party. So tell you.
You think Trump's taking strategy from you on talk radio, Lou?
I mean, you're no Kid Rock, Lou.
Follow the Devil's Advocates on Facebook and Twitter.
To protect his family from disaster, Steve used his camera phone. Done. By taking pictures of his important documents, Steve can always have them stored online. Learn more simple disaster prep tips at ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Weather on this snowy day in Madison could be brought to us by your pizza delivery business. Can you imagine how many families are snuggled in their homes enjoying hot, tasty pizza? Weather makes the phone ring for just $199 per week. Call us at 608-819-8255.
Here's your Mad Radio forecast. Overcast skies tonight with lows around 20. Northeast winds 5 to 10 miles an hour. Overcast tomorrow. High temperatures reach up to 34. Cloudy again tomorrow night. Snow likely 30. Upper 30s Sunday with a chance for snow. Low 30s Monday. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow night through Sunday night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Eric Height. Currently, it's 33 degrees.
I don't know if you know the Devil's Advocates, but the show is kind of a big deal.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Happy Friday to us all. We're going to get to the callers, but our pal Maggie Daun, she says, we got some breaking news. Maggie, what's happening?
Ooh, Dom, I'm so excited to share.
Please do.
I was just going to say the only other big cheese that hasn't testified before this grand jury investigation, which is you always save your money witnesses for the very end, right? Is Michael Cohen, right? He's the guy that pled and as part of his plea agreement was like, yeah, Donald Trump told me to pay her off.
So I did it.
It's
true. I did it.
And then he paid me for it. And we did it because he was running for president. That's what Michael Cohen is going to testify to. And it just broke in the New York Times that Michael Cohen is now scheduled to testify before the grand jury next week. This is it, folks. This is drum roll, please. It is the big finish. And oh, by the way, if anybody was actually wondering if DJT is going to show up and testify, the answer to that is no.
Hells to the no.
If I ever get to see that guy under oath on any of this stuff, wow.
So my understanding from Cohen himself is that he's met with Alvin Bragg and New York.
Yes, he was cooperating.
District Attorney, right. Manhattan DAs for 15, 20 times. Because he met with Cy Vance many times, and now he's met many times with Alvin Bragg, but never, apparently now, he has not testified to our understanding now in front of the grand jury
on this particular investigation. So remember, there were 2 investigations that were going on basically cooperatively and simultaneously with the New York State AG's office and the District Attorney's office in Manhattan.
These side-by-side kind
Correct,
of things, yeah.
But for different crimes. One is the one that we're talking about right now, which is the hush money crime. And again, paying hush money itself isn't a crime.
Nope.
It's when you falsify the business record, and it's when you get, an election benefit. And then when you lie and cover that whole thing up, that's the crime. And then the second investigation, also jointly and contemporaneously, was the inflating asset values for the purposes of getting insurance and financing and things
and
like
lowering taxes, and depending on what situation
if you're getting taxed, it's worth nothing.
Yes.
If you're trying to buy money,
it's billions of dollars. 844-967-2789. Michael Cohen, the fixer in the Stormy Daniels hush money payoff campaign finance violation business fraud case, going to be testifying to the grand jury next week.
Yeah. Can I tell you a little funny about the whole like inflating of value thing?
Sure.
So there is this magic thing in accounting that you know about, Dom, and that I know about. It's called goodwill, and it's sort of when you're
catch-all.
right, you're valuing a business, and it's like you value all the hard assets and then all the intellectual property and all the stuff and their receivables, and the business is still worth more than all that crap combined. You just put it in the goodwill bucket,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
And like everybody that does business or knows anything about accounting is all nodding along with us. I just want you to recognize this beautiful irony, everyone, that when Donald Trump had to value up these businesses, right, to get financing, I guarantee you that goodwill bucket was huge, right? Because he can't get there on the hard asses, but his whole thing is like, it's my name. I put my name on all the stuff. The stuff is worth more.
And he literally
goodwill.
said it himself, like, depending on how I feel, if I feel good that day, it's worth more. I mean,
Right. So all of that is goodwill. So I love the fact that Donald Trump's falsified, fraudulent paperwork that he used to get these big loans and stuff was because his name is worth so much, and thus the goodwill was invaluable.
Definitely part of it. But my understanding as well, I mean, he literally overstated, square
Even on
footage.
the base value.
Yeah,
yes,
right,
yes,
right. So
made up square footage.
I mean, every possible way you could push an assessment or an evaluation, an appraisal,
Yes.
he did.
Well, and here's the other thing. Having dealt with property tax appraisals, I know, tangent. Listen, you property value people out there, you know that's junk science. I'm just saying. You just make that crap up.
It's comparables, Maggie Daun.
Just cherry pick those comps.
844-967-2789. Mark from the Sack, you're up. Welcome, Mark. Happy Friday. What do you got for us today?
Happy Friday, and hopefully my voice holds out.
Sounds good so far.
Were you yelling at your radio, Mark? I hope so.
No, I think I've had that 3-month respiratory virus.
Oh.
You know, and that's following my cancer surgery back in December, which went great. But I mean, it's just
good.
Been
Glad
pretty
to hear that, Mark.
been pretty frustrating.
Yep.
But they took a little bit of my liver, and hopefully that's going to be under that. But it's frustrating for me to hear about the whole abortion issue. I can remember back in the 80s trying to explain to some older colleagues about an ectopic pregnancy, because I had heard about that back in the 70s, back when I was in like high school. And I had to explain to them why in an ectopic pregnancy, the woman had no choice other than an abortion. That it's just very frustrating to hear the same nonsense going on now today. And the other point I'd like to make is what I've been making that the whole Jim Trupis appointment, that all those people that appointed him and approved that, they're also in violation of the Constitution. They ignored the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, period. Jim Trupis was actively involved in the conspiracy to overturn the election, period. He's admitted to it. I mean, it's a fact. And the fact that they can't wrap their little brains around the fact that, that these people don't give a rat's ass about the Constitution, and they need to be confronted every time they appear in public. Somebody should say, "So you don't believe in the Constitution and the 14th Amendment, Section 3?" And
the grotesquerie of the whole charade with Jim Trupis' recent appointment to the Judicial Ethics Commission is doubled by the fact that they know that there is an open Supreme Court seat where there's an election just now weeks away, and you go ahead on a 4-3 vote and appoint this guy anyway. So
for a multi-year term.
Correct. It's a long term. I think it's like 6 or 8 years. I mean, it's an extended period of time. So not only is the timing disgusting, the 4-3 vote is disgusting, and there's this last thing too, right? Anybody else? Like, just find the other conservative guy that will do the same thing, but who isn't Jim Trupis, because you know they exist. It's just as if they really want to stick the thumb in your eye, isn't it?
Isn't the guy from Will available? Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates. We're going to break. We'll come back with your calls. 844-967-2789. Happy Friday. Stick around.
You can handle the truth.
Do we swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yep.
Okay, then.
Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX and on the Civic Media app.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. President Biden's issued a disaster declaration for 34 counties in California following historic storms that have dumped record snowfall in mountain communities from San Bernardino County to Lake Tahoe. New storm now slamming California. State Emergency Services Director Nancy Ward urging people to stay safe.
15 shelters open in 9 counties, more than 9,400 people under evacuation orders, approximately 54,000 plus people without power, and unfortunately, 2 deaths that have so far been confirmed by the coroner's office to be storm-related.
In Germany, police say total deaths from yesterday's mass shooting at a church in Hamburg, now 5. One of the injured is a pregnant woman. She miscarried after the shooting. The latest monthly jobs report from the Labor Department showing 311,000 added in February, higher than projected. This is ABC News.
We're always right, except when we're left. Does that make sense? Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX and streaming on the Civic Media app.
This is Pat Kreitlow from Up North News Radio, inviting you to join us every weekday morning from 6 to 8 a.m. Up North News is your online home for stories that are unabashedly Wisconsin. We cover the latest out of the state capital, of course, but we also celebrate this amazing state with stories about people and places, food, events, history, and more. You can find our work at our website, upnorthnewswi.com, or search for Up North News WI on social media and subscribe to our newsletter too. Then, each morning, I get you caught up on the latest headlines, plenty of weather checks, a little sports. We do a daily music break and a history lesson. We have newsmakers, insiders, community leaders, and all kinds of other guests and regulars. And we take the time to break down an issue or a story and explain it in plain English. Catch Up North News Radio weekdays 6 to 8 here on the radio, the Civic Media website, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
5 hours of special spring primary election coverage, a dozen reporters, hosts, and political experts tracking results for you around Wisconsin.
Everything from your local races to the Supreme Court.
Janet Protasewicz and Dan Kelly moving on to the general election.
Coverage you won't find anywhere else. And we're doing it all again for the important general election in April.
Elections or anytime, we're here for you. Your local Civic Media radio station and streaming on the Civic Media app.
Hey, Dom, how many palindromes can you name in 30 seconds?
Race car, mom, dad, reefer, kayak, level. Did I say mom already?
You're forgetting one really important one.
Zero res.
Not only is it the coolest palindrome ever, it's also our favorite.
Right, I remember. Why is that again?
They advertise with us.
Zero res, my favorite palindrome.
And carpet cleaner. Get the best carpet cleaning ever. Schedule your carpet cleaning online at zeroresmedicine.com. Tell them the Devil's Advocate sent you.
Over the past 30 years, Chad's Design Build has grown and improved how we do things, but we've never lost sight of our commitment to be a great place to work, focused on quality renovations for outstanding clients. Paying a living wage and providing excellent benefits to promote work-life balance does in fact attract outstanding people, which helps to explain our stellar reputation. Thank you, Madison, for 30 amazing years, building a better world one remodeled home at a time. This is Chad Spade for Chad's Design Build.
Self-monitor your blood pressure in 4 easy-to-remember steps. Self-monitoring is power. Visit managerbp.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the American Heart Association, and the American Medical Association, in partnership with the Office of Minority Health and Health Resources and Services Administration.
Rumors spreading round in that Texas town.
The Devil's Advocates, tackling the issues you're not allowed to talk about at the dinner table.
Just let me know.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. 844-967-2789. Got some callers. We'll get to you in a moment. Be patient. Evan will slightly screen you, and we'll get you on to air your grievances or share your opinions. Let us know why that Donald Trump still remains a viable Republican presidential candidate. In fact, leading in all the polls, he'll tell you. And now with this new seemingly imminent
criminal
indictment
charge
from Alvin Bragg and Manhattan DA, Trump went on his Truthy Social recently and just lambasted Horsey McHorseface and Alvin Bragg and the racists and all. You know how Trump does it. We're not going to read it because you can imagine.
Don't read that.
It's hard to. I can't even read it.
Barely literate.
It is.
Folks,
it
barely.
is.
At least Dan Kennedy can speak the king's English.
It's really kind of amazing how far we've fallen. I mean, this is a former president. This is now another president. He's a presidential candidate, and he's leading in the Republican polls. And this is how he communicates. These are his ideas. This is, and I keep reflecting on the fact that I was never the most engaged or civil or nice or empathetic. I try to do better as I get older and realize how I want to live my life, right? But when I look at these kinds of situations, and I'm the one thinking, oh my God, that's asinine. Oh my God, where's the credibility? Oh my God, where's the character? I sound like my old man. I can't even believe that I'm the one now like looking at what ex-presidents, former Wisconsin Supreme Court justices, lawyers, and these folks. They're everybody's the same. You know what I'm saying? That's why I don't think you put anybody on a pedestal. You treat everybody the same. Donald Trump should have been charged the very same day they charged Michael Cohen. This OLR rule of the Justice Department that they don't charge a sitting president is just a rule. It's
silly.
It's never been challenged. It's asinine. I know what does it do? It encourages this kind of behavior. You can't tell me if you got some sort of case going on that they can't differentiate their normal job of governing from their private stuff, right? So that brings us to where we are today. And this Republican Party, this GOP, Maggie Daun, they are in disarray. What a disaster.
Well, and it seems that there's no one willing to stand up other than Mitt Romney, apparently. I mean, this is the guy
those that did no longer run, right?
Correct.
Right, yeah.
They have to leave, bow out,
or
right?
got
Liz
thrown
Cheney
out. Yep.
can't win in a freaking primary. Did you ever think that Darth Vader's daughter was going to have a problem in a Republican primary? This is how far we've come. And let's just keep in mind, here's what Tucker Carlson has said about the president.
Oh, yes.
I've been waiting to get to this all day.
I know. Lots of paper over there, Maggie, but good time to do it.
Oh, yeah, legit. Of course, I read through about half of the 400 pages of the actual documents and deposition transcripts that support the summary judgment brief that everybody has been talking about in the Dominion voter systems case. Here is what Tucker Carlson really thinks about Donald Trump. I hate him passionately. What he's good at is destroying things. He's the undisputed world champion of that. He could easily destroy us if we play it wrong.
You played it wrong, Tucker.
Tucker Carlson, okay? More Tucker 3 days after that.
Yeah.
We're all pretending we've got a lot to show for Trump's 4 years because admitting to what a disaster it's been is too tough to digest. But come on, there really isn't an upside to Trump.
Let's put him in the White House again.
That's Tucker. So all of the conservatives out there, that's what Tucker Carlson really thinks about Donald Trump. And then just this small bit on the integrity level of Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
Because that was Tucker Carlson on January 4th and January 7th, respectively, in 2021.
So it was right around the insurrection.
Right.
Okay.
2 days before, right? Two days before and 1 day after. Same thing. On the integrity of Tucker Carlson, here's what he had to say on Tuesday. The protesters were angry. They believed the election that they had just voted in had been unfairly conducted, and they were right. In retrospect, it's clear that 2020 was a grave betrayal of American democracy, given the facts that have
Facts.
I'm surprised he didn't throw up some air quotes on that one. Given the facts that have emerged since the election, no honest person can deny it.
And when did he say that?
Yeah, that was on Tuesday night.
This past Tuesday. Couple of days ago.
Yeah. Again, I'm just going to Tucker Carlson on Donald Trump on January 4th, 2021. I hate him passionately. What he's good at is destroying things. He's the undisputed champion of that. He could easily destroy us if we play it wrong. The day after the violent insurrection, we're all pretending we've got a lot to show for Trump's 4 years because admitting to what a disaster it's been is too tough to digest. But come on, there really isn't an upside to Trump.
Yeah. Now, and he doesn't say it to the audience.
No, he says it to the other elite intelligentsia within the Fox News universe.
When we have these conversations and we hang out socially as well. You tell me things.
No,
that,
we just play like we're friends when we're on the radio.
Right.
Damn it.
do you tell me things that you absolutely do not believe?
Right. When we're in private, like in text messages or at the bar, that's when I lie.
You know what I mean?
I don't lie ever. But apparently Tucker Carlson does. Here's what you do in a courtroom, right? Both of these things can't be true. So when were you lying, Tucker?
Right.
Right. And like, I haven't even read all of the portions of Tucker's Carlson's sworn deposition testimony where he's asked repeatedly, do you think that the 2020 election was free and fair? And he's like, yes. Mm-hmm. What he says is, I've not seen any evidence to the contrary.
But he's just asking questions on his show.
Right. Well, that's his shtick, right? This is no honest person can deny. You can't possibly think good people don't say things like that.
I'm just asking questions, but when did you stop beating your wife?
Right.
I'm just asking questions. It's just questions.
I mean, here's some of my other absolute favorite little things that were happening. And by the way, the thing that I hated about the brief and that
the Dominion brief.
Right. The
for
Dominion
summary
brief,
judgment.
Right. The Dominion brief, and lawyers fall prey to this all the time. It's like you get so sucked into the details. Like they're so good. And what they just should have put together was like the simplest of timelines, because that's how you know. I've always argued, follow the incentives, right? And the incentives will, who's getting paid and for what. And it will tell you all you need to know about what people's choices were.
Yeah.
Right. And what the timeline would show is that Fox was starting to lose ground leading into the election. And everyone at Fox knew after the election, and certainly after Fox called it for Trump,
made the right call.
Yes,
that they were very upset about.
Right. And by the way, there's an email exchange where one of the hosts, I think it's Lou Dobbs or Bartolomo, is like, you guys need to retract that. That can't be true. Blah, blah, blah. We need to keep hope alive for Donald Trump. And one of the news desk producers writes back, it's not a matter of hope. It's called math.
Right. The number, the votes.
Right?
We counted
It's
the
just,
votes.
It's math.
And he lost.
Yeah, we can't retract that because that's what happened. But within all of that chaos, right? And then after they start losing eyeballs and ratings and all the polling that they're doing about how their typical consumer, their died and true Fox viewer is feeling about them, and they are losing. They're getting creamed and they know it. And so you have this problem, right, where the news desk at Fox is like, all of these people are starting to say crazy things. This was not stolen. This election is over. And everyone on Fox's news side knows it. So does everyone on their editorial side. So does Rupert Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch, and everyone that was in the executive leadership of Fox News at the time. But they knew they couldn't get on the air and say that because it would mean the end of their business model.
But I don't understand that. Even if you're obviously people, if your candidate loses and your main source and backer of that candidate, that's going to be a tough party. I understand that. But I don't know that, if you look at MSNBC, if you call them the MSDNC, if you're going to look at that,
they criticize
when Hillary Clinton lost,
they called it.
They called it
for Trump.
Did their business? I mean, maybe viewership fell off. People get a little burned out on politics after a presidential election. I mean, but that's, I understand that if part of your audience, but
they were facing their market alternatives in Newsmax and One America News or the 08, whatever that is, right?
Yes.
And those stations were starting to suck major eyeballs. And listen, when you have so convinced yourself that everything that you do is right and this is all for the betterment, right? Rupert Murdoch's not a guy that likes to lose. That's just not a billionaire's mentality. Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, these are not people that are innately wired to accept defeat graciously, right? So it's not the same polemic. And you also forget that Hillary Clinton wasn't going to define the Democratic Party for the rest of time,
Right.
or at least the foreseeable future at that moment.
It wasn't a cult.
It absolutely wasn't. And that was a very different landscape that Fox was facing. And so what the meta narrative here, the big picture is, not only is Tucker Carlson a liar, right, that thinks his smart butt can outsmart middle-class America. Not only does Laura Ingraham think she's smarter than working-class America, and Lou Dobbs, right, and Sean Hannity. It's all garbage. But the meta conceit is like, it wasn't just about January 6th. It wasn't just about the big lie about the election. They've been doing this all along. The only reason we got the receipts is because Dominion Voting Systems decided to sue them. So everybody out there that's like, oh, whatever, that's just about this weird one Trump thing. Do you really think that these people haven't been lying to you all along?
They just started
when
now.
it has suited their economic interests? That's just like, fool me once, maybe, shame on you. But you can't think that if this is okay about the most important thing that's happened in our modern American democratic history, that they would lie about that they wouldn't lie about all of the small stuff if it suits them well?
Absolutely. Well, come on. Tucker Carlson's out there showing like the 41,000 hours of
5 minutes.
Everyone's just hanging out, walking in. It looks really nice. It's all good.
Wait, Dom, I've got it. The protesters were angry. They believed that the election they had just voted in had been unfairly conducted, and they were right. In retrospect, it's clear that 2020 was a grave betrayal of American democracy. Yeah, because of you.
And he said that when?
This Tuesday.
Still doing it.
Yes.
Still doing it. Still doubling down. Still engaging in the lie. Still gaslighting their audience. Still disrespecting. In some ways, and I'm not a big defender of the Fox News viewers, but you have been very much harmed by what these people have told you. And you stand up there, and all you Fox News viewers, you listen to folks like us talk, and you question us. But listen, your source is admitted in court they lied to you, that it was not stolen, that they were more concerned about what? Not the red, not the blue. What was
the ratings.
The green, baby.
Yeah.
It was all about the green.
I mean, let's remind ourselves, here's Rupert Murdoch in his deposition taken on January 19th, right? Month and a half ago. Was Joe Biden legitimately elected as president of the United States? Answer, yes. And you've known that since Fox called the election for Biden on November 7th, 2020. Yes, the election was not stolen. Do you believe President Trump was a sore loser? Yes. How did you vote? I voted by mail. So you understand there's nothing fraudulent about voting by mail. Yeah, I'm sure of it. When did you realize it was, in your words, a bunch of conspiracy nonsense? Well, when AG Barr made his statement on December 1st, 2020. So you've always doubted any claim of massive election fraud. Oh, yes. We thought everything was on the up and up.
God, would have saved this country a whole lot of heartache if you just had your folks come on the radio at the time and just, relayed that, shared that. But no, they were concerned about the money. They were concerned about their favorability ratings going from 70 down to 30 something. Folks, last segment of the day coming up. We're going to take your calls. I promise. Be patient. Stick around. Maggie Daun. Look forward to it. 844-967-2789.
Boy, it's like they're so ideological that they subvert their own interest.
Finish your high school diploma for you and your family. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free adult education centers near you. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The Devil's Advocates.
Bill Press, thanks for sticking around, man.
The idea that idiot, Ron Johnson, the guy who says you can't call it an armed riot because they didn't have any arms. Read or listen to what Michael Fanone says about Ron Johnson and the fact that there were no arms. It was an armed riot. And Ron Johnson, he's a phony who doesn't deliver, who lies, who certainly does not represent Wisconsin. I hope that people realize there's no Senate seat more important in this country.
For podcasts of shows, special events, and more, visit civicmedia.us.
I taught for 20 years, until I started forgetting my lectures.
Eventually, he had to quit. Getting his early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard, but it gave us time to take control of the situation, together.
I can't imagine going through this without him.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Weather on this snowy day could be brought to us by your business. Can you imagine how many ice augers and fishing shanties are being bought as we speak? Weather sponsorships make the phone ring. Call us at 608-819-8255.
Here's your Mad Radio forecast. Lows dip down to about 20 tonight. Under cloudy skies, winds out of the northeast, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies expected tomorrow. High temperatures reach up to 34. Cloudy skies expected again tomorrow night. Snow likely. Lows level off around 30. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow night through Sunday night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Derek Height. Currently, it's 33 degrees.
Save the $2 on tomorrow's paper. Listen to the Devil's Advocates today.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show, the last segment of the day. Time flies when you're having fun. We promise. We'll get to the calls in a moment. 844-967-2789. I know there were a couple of things we wanted to throw out there quick, Maggie.
Yeah.
Which one do you want to go with first?
So if you didn't believe me when I was like, yeah, everybody at Fox News, and they were trying to hush up the people that wanted to tell the truth, there's this little ditty that came out in the last 2 weeks. Fox host Sandra Smith on air, and this is November 11th, after the election had been called for Biden. The guest on Fox starts prattling on about, like, it might not have actually been won by Biden. And the Fox anchor sort of is like, what is she talking about on a hot mic? I mean, it's priceless.
Let's hear the actual.
Evan,
I think this is very important. This goes to the point that, some folks were like, oh, as soon as they heard this, we're like, what? Let's play it, if you would, Evan. This is the Fox Calls It cut one.
Whoever is decided to be the president, remember, just because CNN says, or even Fox News says that somebody's president, doesn't make them president. So I think everybody wants to know that this was done properly and legally.
What is happening? Like, Trace, we've called it.
And I think we have to look into every one of these concerns.
Yeah, and I think, that's a very good point there, Steve.
All right, that's fine. Trace, we called it. What? What's happening? Yeah, what's happening? What is this crazy person saying on the show right now? What's happening?
And that was supposed to be on one of the, quote, hard news shows for Fox. And listen, the whole Fox conceit has always been like there's the news side and opinion side. Well, let's not forget that since all of this has gone down and a little bit beforehand, Fox has absolutely cleared these people out. That anchor, Sandra Smith, got reprimanded within Fox, and she got less airtime. This is when Chris Wallace is leaving, Shepard Smith, and a slew of actual news editors and production folks at Fox. They do not tell you the truth, and anybody who wants to tell the truth on Fox, well, your ass is fired.
844-967-2789. I only know how to tell the truth. Angie, you are up from Monroe. Welcome, Angie. What do you got for us?
Okay, I have a question. Like, with Tucker Carlson, isn't he doing the same thing, kind of like what Alex Jones did with the Sandy Hook, where he's saying lies? Can't the Capitol Police do like a class action suit, the ones that got hurt, and sue Tucker Carlson, especially for this last video that he made?
I think it's a really good question. And I don't think we've seen the end of creative lawyering. I think The Alex Jones lawsuit was so clearly emotionally traumatic, right, and harmful to private citizens, right? The difference here is you're dealing with a lot of folks that are knowingly and willingly in the public, and they're elected officials, so there's some amount of give or take that can happen there. In other words, higher standard to show harm. But one of the arguments that I'm waiting for a defense lawyer to make about one of the folks who's being prosecuted for their violent acts on January 6th is that I'm so stupid and mentally deranged and Tucker made me do it. Right? That actually fully tries to place the blame for this. Hey, these people were news people. I thought news people were supposed to tell me the truth. They told me they put these people on their airwaves. The president said the same thing. What do you mean I'm in the wrong? Because why would I be in the wrong if what they just said is true? Think about that, right? If what Donald Trump was saying was true, and if what Tucker Carlson just suggested on Tuesday was actually true, if millions of votes had been illegally turned here on planet Earth and an election stolen from a president, I could maybe understand people taking some extreme action. But the whole problem was that but for those actors, but for Laura Ingraham, but for Tucker Carlson, but for Rupert Murdoch, but for Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Jim Trupis and Robert Spendell and Ron Johnson and Dan Kelly, these average Americans wouldn't have been there. So the media elites, the legal elites, the richest of the richest 1%, yes, they did conspire to take down middle America. And they did so to create January 6th. That is what these documents show. And they did so to keep themselves wealthy and in power and to keep you, middle-class America, buying the lie. They should all be sued. And every criminal defendant that is facing charges on January 6th should take a plea, but be sure that in that plea agreement, they lay the blame solidly where it belongs. It's a disgusting, disgusting engagement that has occurred, and the gaslighting that continues should be criminal.
844-967-2789. Rico from Rock County, you are next. Welcome, Rico. What do you got for us?
Hey, you did a great job this week, Don. I knew you
thanks,
would.
man. Hey, you know what? It's easier when you got good friends to show up and hang out with me, man. But thank you.
Yeah, and then you saved the best for last and just knocked it right out of the park with Maggie Daun on Fridays. I knew that was going to happen. Hey, if you just, oh my gosh, that story about Michael Cohen that you broke there, that's big. I could just feel Donnie taking it to the knees on that one. Holy cow. You know, word on the street is this Michael Cohen guy, he's not no real big fan of yours, Donnie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he wrote a book about that, Rico.
Yeah, and went to prison.
Went to prison for it. Yes. Thanks for the call, Rico. It's been an interesting journey, Maggie Daun, and to finally have at least one of these things slowly looking like it's going to break is going to make next week even that much more entertaining. And I hate to use that word because if we don't laugh, we cry. You know what I'm saying? At least I don't. I gotta like take it in stride. And we talk about these things, the overthrowing of the will of the people. This is the most basic of rights and needs of a democracy.
Yep.
And if we're going to allow these media companies and we're going to allow these politicians, because don't kid yourself. I mean, there are people, there are politicians that are very much involved in this that sit on committees right now.
One of them, Senator Ron Johnson.
One of them is Senator Ron Johnson.
Yep.
And
lock him up.
These things need to be investigated, need to be addressed. Because I'm pretty sure if it was any of us, like it was Michael Cohen in his one particular case, we would be facing consequences for our actions. That's all I'm asking for, Maggie Daun. You know, equal justice
under the law.
Under the law.
Yeah, that is not what happens in the United States of America, and it's never been what's happened under the United States of America. It's the ideal of the United States of America. And these prosecutions of Donald Trump, whatever you think of the man or the party politics, we have to try to get better at that one thing, to hold the rich and powerful just as accountable as little me and you. If we can't agree on that, like, what can we?
We can agree that you are awesome. Maggie Daun, thank you for coming and hanging out with me this Friday. Thank you to our fair audience. Thanks for joining me. Next week, I got Earl coming in on Monday morning. He's going to be the Co-Devil. And Jane Matnair, Kristen Bry coming on Tuesday. Crudy's back on Wednesday. Maybe. We'll see. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Hear that? If you own a business, that's a problem. What you really need is this. If you want to make your phone ring this spring, we have just the thing. Sponsor weather forecasts on your local Civic Media station.